let's discuss the purpose of the literature review. So what's the purpose of the literature review? What's very, very important in this series of videos is to give you an understanding of the literature review in order to help you work out how you intend to approach it. So this very first video is just going to give you an overview and pick out some key ideas. Well, the main purpose of what is called a traditional, or sometimes called a narrative, literature review is to analyze and summarize a body of literature. So in that model, let's just pause on two elements. Summarize is fairly straightforward. Most people know what that means. Analyze is the absolutely critical element. What do we mean by a body of literature? Well, it's a collection of relevant articles, books, blogs, websites, and so on, which will help you understand a particular question. Okay, so just knowing that a literature review, one of the purposes is basically to analyze and summarize a body of literature, is too vague, it's too open. For you to approach it in any kind of sensible way, you need to think about what it is that you are trying to do. Why are you analyzing and summarizing a body of literature? To what end? And very typically, and also related to yours, is you are trying to answer a specific research question. So what you will find is you will be given a research question, or in some cases a research topic, and the purpose is to go and undertake some research. So the literature review requires you to undertake research. And what you do with this method of research is you gather together all the relevant articles and material for that relate to that particular research question. You analyze it and you output the result as a written literature review. That's kind of a good starting summary, but on its own, it's probably not enough. So let's dig into this a little bit further before we finish this overview. There are several different approaches you can take, and perhaps the dominant ones, the dominant models, are what I described already as the traditional or narrative, and this type of literature review is also called semi-structured, or a semi-systematic literature review, if I just write lit rev for short. So you get this traditional idea. We need to define what that is, what's involved in that. But then you also have the systematic literature review. And the systematic literature review, the most obvious examples are the ones related to healthcare. In healthcare, you would do a literature review on all the research perhaps gathered over a particular topic, and you use statistics, you use quantitative methods, i.e. you use numbers and analysis, numerical analysis, in order to systematically review the body of literature related to that particular topic. Now that's very, very popular in medicine. Generally speaking, for the type of literature we're interested in for non-medical, is what you might just like to think of as the narrative. If I call it the narrative, and you'll see that there are other words for it, as we've said already, there's the semi-systematic, and also it is the traditional way. So let's try to see if we can unpick what that is and what the narrative approach means. Okay, so a narrative or a traditional literature review is all about, as we said, analyzing and summarizing a body of knowledge. So the key words here are analyzing. You analyze, you summarize, as we've said already, and you're dealing with a body of literature. And what we mean by literature is a collection of articles, journal articles, books, etc. Everything that's relevant. So there's sort of three concepts involved. Let's try to say a little bit more. The purpose of it, when you do this type of review, you achieve it by presenting a background of the literature related to your research. What you're trying to do is you're looking at, when you do this in relation to a wider research project, you tend to look for gaps, you tend to look for inconsistencies. It depends what the research question is. And what this tends to do is it tends to sharpen a grasp of a particular theory, a particular set of ideas. So think about an element of this traditional approach is that I look at a body of literature, I select it, I've got to have a method, and in later videos we'll talk about how you would approach this. Right, so I've got a body of articles related to a research question. At the heart of it is a research question. Or a topic. Topic is broader, and topic gives you more challenges. A research question helps narrow down what you're trying to do. When you look at a topic, for example, then it becomes broader and actually riskier. And when you're dealing with a topic, a research topic, you need to work a strategy out and have a reasoned approach to why you're selecting the articles you are and so on. And we'll come back to that in a minute. So what we're trying to do in the literature review is we're not just trying to read and summarize. If that's all we were trying to do, that would be fine. We're not just trying to summarize a collection on a particular topic. That's just like doing a study of some kind. You're trying to analyze them. You're trying to pick them apart. You're trying to spot patterns in the literature. You're looking at trends. You're looking at issues. You're looking at developments, and you're looking at your research topic stroke question, how it relates, how this article in some way relates back to this research topic. Okay, so an example is obviously always really, really useful, and we will pick our way through an example. For the time being, we are just giving an initial idea. Now, when we undertake a literature review, we need to gather information clearly from a number of sources. Okay. And the issue for you is when it comes to looking at sources is first of all, are they relevant sources to the topic at hand, to the research question? Are they credible? Right. Now, this is quite an important concept here, and we'll come back to that in a second. So you try to gather info from a number of sources, but when you choose the sources, you have to have some kind of approach, some kind of method of which sources, right, are you going to choose. So what kind of method would you do? How would you define what's credible and what's relevant? Well, you'll look at various things like the journal, whether it's a journal, whether it's a blog article, whether it's a YouTube video, etc., etc. Each of these have an associated range of credibility. Now, what do we mean by credibility? It's worth perhaps just pausing on that word, because that will make a big difference when we come to look at and your work is assessed. Because if you built your gathering of information and the sources you chose were, let's just say, blogs, newspaper articles, for quite a technical subject, and you found them very useful. But if you only use those, what's the issue of credibility here? The issue of credibility is what we consider if you think, going back to the pre-internet era, this is perhaps the easiest way to explain it. In a pre-internet era, we had a situation where textbooks that were published on a particular book had to go through a rigorous process, through editors, through reviews, in order to publish that material, to make that material more reliable. The issue of credibility arises because the reliability of material you find on the internet, you need to have an independent standard, right, in order to justify what is relevant and reliable and credible. And credibility is particularly important here. You know, is it just someone writing a blog in their spare time? Blogs aren't always a waste of time. In fact, what students typically do is they'll use some more basic approaches like blogs and more accessible points to find a way in to good sources. So in a blog, for example, you'll find it might have a reference list, and that reference list will probably be more useful to you to actually cite as a source. We'll come back to method a little bit later, but these are critical issues. So we're just going to look at that. So we have that. Why do we do literature reviews? Let's just come back to that question as well. So why a literature review? Well, a literature review is a way of showing that you have understood a number of different things. What people have written about the subject, what people have done, and so on. You are really basically, to understand the purpose of a literature review, is that you are situating, you are placing a frame around some research that you would normally take. Now, if you're just asked to do a literature review without leading to, say, a research topic, so typically in a final year, if a student comes and says, I'd like to do a research project on this, we would ask them to engage in a literature review. The literature review would survey, analyze, pick apart what other people have done related to the thing you're interested. You then present your literature review, and your literature review helps show that you know what people are saying about it, what people are doing about it. So you place your own research interests within context of what you know other people have done. Okay? That's a very, very typical thing to do. Now, if you're just asked to do a literature review on its own, and you've got no further purpose to it other than you've been asked to do a literature review, your literature review is really to talk about how well you can pick apart what people have said about a particular topic. You are going to critically look at literature and comments from credible sources on that. You do like to look at gaps. I mean, I mentioned this previously, gaps and inconsistencies. So, for example, you might find, when you're looking at a topic, that everyone agrees pretty much. So there's a great agreement on a particular aspect, right? But you might find there's disagreement or in other areas. So it'll never fall into very, very simple, yes, basically everyone thinks this about this topic, so therefore, et cetera, et cetera. What you'll find is that, yes, there's a lot of common knowledge and a common agreement, and that tends to be the basis upon which people explore the subject. But there'll be disagreement, or there'll be different branches of interest in that, different angles, different perspectives. And that's also part of why you do a literature review, because you're drawing out this territory here to help you see, again, it's always in context of undertaking research. Having said research down here and literature at the top, it's also important to realize that literature review is technically a piece of research. And let's just emphasize that point to draw this initial video close to the end. literature review, one other way is that it's a form of research. You're given a research topic or a research question, and the way that you undertake your research is to find what other people have said about this particular topic, and you pick that apart. You analyze it, you capture what the key points are, you look at the contradictions, you look at the gaps. You're really trying to look at the state of the debate and discussion on this particular research topic, research area, and you're trying to show, I mean, in an ideal world, you find some gap and you can identify something original. You can respond to it in your literature review and show that this opens up an opportunity for something new. Very typical way that we use literature review in the industry. When we think about, and I'll make this the very last series of points here for this introductory video, when we think about a literature review, we tend to need to answer a bunch of questions. We need to know what you learn about a research area, a research topic. Okay, so that's obviously, or a research question, shall we say. Okay, what you learn, what you know about it. Critically, you want to know what the relationships are between the key ideas in that field, the various dynamics between those ideas, and variables in that. What are the key variables of that particular domain of knowledge or topic or research area? So these are quite good ways of thinking about it. Part of the process of researching is a process of selecting through some method a bunch of sources, and those sources have to be credible and reliable and relevant. Then from there you draw out of them, the technical word is you abstract, you lift out of them what the key ideas are, what the key concepts or variables are. So if you find 3 articles all talking about the same topic, clearly that topic, that particular detail is a variable. If you can break it down even further and show what it's made of so it's sharper and clearer, all the better. You're also then going to look at maybe the key theories as well, the trends, and also the themes that emerge through your literature review. These are quite important things. If I have asked you to research a technology, let's just say biometric fingerprinting, for example, has been a popular one from a previous year, or if I've asked you to look at algorithms used for carbon footprints, for example, and the development of carbon footprint technologies, you will also look and discover certain trends as well. You won't just find the key elements within it. You'll spot there are certain key theories, agreed ideas about what's going on in this territory. There are key themes, which will be things like, why are we doing this? And that's often a very particular theme. And remember, at the back of a literature review is always in the long term acting as a frame for further research. And that is a critical element of how you will encounter it in your final year project. And also, just to link it to working life, if you've got a new technology or you've got a new problem in a working situation, you need to undertake at work some kind of research on that problem, what kind of technologies there are, and you need to present that. Your research into the technologies you find needs to be analytical. It can't simply be descriptive. You need to show some thought, right? We need to know the answer of why. We need to have talk about justifications, reasons when we're analyzing. Not simply, this is what the technology is, this is what it is, this is what it does. That's not being objective. So maybe my last thought to you in this introductory video is that there's a kind of lazy assumption that if you make your literature review very descriptive, so you basically pick out a bunch of points and that's all you really do, because in doing so you think you're being more objective. And objective is good because you think objective is science, and that's what science is all about, and that's what you're doing in a computing related degree. But actually, that's not the right approach. Yes, you do need description, but description isn't the point. Analysis is. Analysis, it's not subjective, it clearly opens up that particular territory. If your description shows a certain field and you describe the objects in that field and perhaps how they're interconnected, your analysis, the purpose of your analysis for that same thing, is to question the why of these connections, is to question the very, very things that you're finding. It digs deeper into it. And there are techniques to analyze that give you a much better understanding, a much more useful understanding for that technology, its use, its development, and so on. So I'm going to stop this introductory video at that point with that brief summary. And then what we're going to do in the next series of one is pick through the method and approach and how you would approach it.